When did you first enter the music industry?
I fell into the job of booking bands into my college. And as I say, I literally fell into it. It wasn't what I was looking for.
And that was in the 1960s, wasn't it?
Yeah, 63.
1963. Okay. And how did you fall into it? Was it kind of something which?
Well, I was always, as a teenager, a fan of pop music. I had my Elvis Presley collection and so on, but I never thought of it as a career. But at the end of my first year, I decided I ought to get serious and try to get the full college experience. So I went to the president of the Students' Union and asked him to give me a job. And he was a bit thrown by that. And I just said, I want to do something. Give me something to organize. I just want to get the full college experience. So, yeah. I'd have done anything, but he said, well, we've got people to do most jobs, but there's one job that we need filling. The students seem to want these pop groups, and we've never had pop groups at the college before, and the girl whose job it is doesn't know how to do it. Yeah. So how do you fancy that? So I said, well, I've no idea either, but I asked for a job, and if that's the job that's available, I'll give it a try. And I just thought, well, I want to be part of this, and yeah. my year in charge had been extremely successful, and we sold out every show, and I became a bit of a personality around college because of it, and I just thought, well, I seem to be quite good at it. Maybe I can make a career of it.
So after university, what did you do?
I decided I wanted to start my own booking agency, which was, a sort of foolish idea that you have when you're 22 or 23 and you think you can conquer the world. What I did was I had met, I don't know if do you know the name The Animals?
Yes, I've heard of them.
Well, they were the first group that I booked. They were a Newcastle group. They were the first group that I booked into the college.
Yeah.
And whilst I was there, I got to know their manager, a guy called Mike Jeffrey.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him before, after I graduated, and I was about to sort of, set up this booking agency, and I was chatting with him, and I said that's what I was going to do, and he said, well, I've got a better idea. He said, my business is going very well. The Animals are doing incredibly well in America. And I've got an office in London, and I represent a bunch of bands, and I've just taken on a new management client called Jimi Hendrix. He said, why don't you come into partnership with me in a booking agency in London? So I packed my bags and went off to London and started work in an office in Soho.
How much time was there between you accepting that offer to then setting up Chrysalis Records? Because there must have been quite some time.
Yeah, well, I went off to London to work with him, and he gave me an office and a phone and some bands to book, but he told me I had to make my own living. I had to make a living out of the commissions on the bookings that I made. And so after a year, I basically wasn't making any money. So I started a little part-time booking agency, basically booking bands into colleges. So on my weekends and evenings, or mostly on my weekends, I'd go, my mother gave me the deposit on a little Mini, and I'd go off to colleges and persuade them that they needed me to help them book their bands. And after about a year of doing that, I was just about making enough money. I absolutely loved all the time I spent in the music business, and I just made the decision that I'd rather spend my life doing something that I loved, even if it meant not making any money. After a few months, I met Chris Wright, who was doing a similar thing in Manchester, and we met and decided that we'd be better off together than competing with each other.
Yeah.
He moved to London we joined forces and became the Ellis Wright Agency.
So the Ellis Wright Agency, I'm guessing now, was around for a year.
Well, we changed our name from the Ellis Wright Agency to the Chrysalis Agency, and we became actually very successful. You know, we were Led Zeppelin's agents and agents for Yes and King Crimson and Procol Harum and a whole string of very successful acts. And then we became managers. Chris managed a group called 10 Years After. And I started to manage Jethro Tull, who were a band that we were booking agents for. And Ian Anderson approached me and asked me if I'd become their manager. So I said yes. And so we started being managers as well as running the agency. Although eventually we brought a couple of other guys in to run the agency so we could focus on managing.
Yeah.
And we made a record deal for 10 Years After with Decca Records, who were a big record company in England at the time, and that didn't work out very well. And we decided that it was sufficiently important to control the marketing that we should start our own record company. The idea of the record company was to support the artists that we managed. It was an extension of our management company. Our goal wasn't to be a big record company at all.
And how was it producing those? Was it fun? Was it interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it was something I did as sort of part of my job as a manager. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. You know, the producers that I talked to, I wasn't very impressed by because I didn't think that they were going to capture the spirit of the band, which was a humorous, theatrical band. So I talked to my partner and said, you know, I fancy doing it myself. And he said, well, you know, give it a try. So we booked one session of, I think, 4 hours. And we produced 3 tracks in the 4 hours. And I took it back to play to Chris and said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, you know, I think it's pretty good. So I said, well, shall I finish the album? He said, well, yeah, it's a good idea. And so, you know, I finished the album, and the album cost £500. And in the meantime, I'd become friendly with Chris Blackwell at Island Records, and we made a deal with Chris. And that was very successful. And so we decided that we'd produce more of the artists that we managed. So we produced, you know, several other records that were successful. We had a number of chart successes. And part of our deal with Chris Blackwell was that if we got a certain number of chart successes, then we got our own label. So before that, the records came out on Island with a credit of the Chrysalis production. But then after a while, when we had some success, we reverted to the Chrysalis label. So I think the first records came out in '69 or something.
Okay. In your own opinion, how do you think the music industry works?
Well, you know, the music industry is about musicians. And I guess the music industry comprises a bunch of people who make money out of the music that musicians make. I mean, and as I try to stress, never forget that the most important people in the music business are musicians. And in recent history, record companies have begun to think they were more important than the musicians, and they've got their comeuppance because they're not doing very well.
Back in the 1960s, 70s, you had to either be able to sing or actually be able to play an instrument to be an artist. How do you think the industry is changing with all this future technology? Well, what distinguishes a musician from a machine is creativity. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of hip hop or rap, just because I don't really see them as music. I see rap as being a social movement rather than a musical movement. And to me, music is about melody. What I would call the rock era, starting in the mid-50s and going through mid-80s, maybe mid-90s, was, you know, the sort of golden era of music for me, because, you know, it was rock music, but rock music with melodies. And melodies are the creative element of music. and you can't reproduce. Machines aren't creative.
So why do you think vinyl is actually coming back?
It's coming back in a very, very small way.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of people who feel that the vinyl sounds better than CDs or any other, or digital downloads, anything which is compressed.
Yeah.
It's nice that it's making a comeback, but it's not very small.
To any people out there trying to get into the music industry, what would you suggest to them?
Well, I think that the most important thing today is to understand that what is driving the music industry are live shows. If you look at the number since the year 2000, so let's say almost the last 20 years, if you look at the numbers today, revenues from recorded music, and when I say revenues from recorded music, I mean streaming and sales. Revenues from recorded music are 60% of what they were in the year 2000.
Yeah.
Revenues from live concerts are, I think, 8 times what they were in 2000. And do the research on revenues from concerts and revenues from recorded music, and you'll find that the revenues from recorded music have slumped, and the revenues from the live concerts have soared, which for me is great, because we went through a period where record companies thought they ruled the music business, and I think a lot of musicians thought that they could make a living by just recording in the studio, and they just forgot what the music business is about. The music business is about musicians getting onto a stage and entertaining people. In the 60s, nobody got into the music business to make money. There was no money. So if you're Paul McCartney or Mick Jagger or Elton John or Eric Clapton, you didn't get into the music business to make money. You got into the music business because you loved playing music and being on stage. And if you look at all of those people today, as rich as they are and as successful as they've been, you can't keep them off stage. Because when they were 15, that's what they wanted to do. That's all they wanted to do, was be able to get on a stage and play music. And the fact that they're zillionaires now hasn't changed that. Paul McCartney is always on tour. The Stones are on tour again. And why do they do that? They certainly don't need the money. They do it because that's what they love, and that's what they always loved. My humble opinion, one of the things that changed the music business and contributed to where we are today, where most of the music that's produced is absolute garbage, in my opinion, and that has impacted the audience's interest in music and in buying records, for example. But in the mid-'80s, all of a sudden, in the mid-'80s, record sales started to increase, and by the year 2000, record sales were enormous, and young people started to think about music rather than a career you do because you love it. They started to think of music as a way to get rich, and if that's the way you're thinking, if you're thinking about getting rich as opposed to expressing yourself, then the creativity goes out of the music.